good. Yeah, it's big. Yeah, yeah. I saw that. Yeah. Yeah, Dave said that I heard him say interviewed the NTCD back there. I don't know, they were at OPPD helping them. They said they've been there since Friday night. Right. So. Yeah. I mean, I saw him coming back Sunday night about 7:30. That's a good thing. Yeah. Well, yeah, well, I saw him have the backyard machine. I was surprised he didn't. Oh, but I didn't. Yeah, it got us like I watched Saturday. Yeah, but there's a chance tomorrow. It's there's a good chance tomorrow. Yeah. I guess you'd call him back. But it looks like. Yeah. I just saw they said we're in the middle of like a spike risk. Yeah. Yeah. So like 40%. Yeah. Tonight? No. No, I checked the radar with it. And we can. No, I mean, they're working now. I would assume they're down by. June said they were down on Blondo. Yes, I was gonna say 75th and Blondo. Yeah, 95th. That's where I saw most of the damage. But that's the David calls. Yeah. One person said the wires were on the ground, but they still had electricity in the house. That sucks. Because anybody goes out there and tends with the week out. Yeah. Oh, that's the thing the other people don't. These electricians. That's why it comes. Yeah, it's they need electrician. So yeah. The stripper thing. Yeah, we charge for our storms. It's on the, yeah, it would be absolute. Sure, this will go on. That's gonna. So. So transform, I'm going to talk to Peter Chuck. I didn't call last week. We do want to do something with sub D, and it's going to require a transformer. Is one of those transformers for that? So then what I'll do is, I mentioned it to Nate early on, that he thought it was unique. What I'm going to do is ask him to see lease. Where we'll pay rent per month. They own it. Instead of us paying the capital for something, right, exactly. Yeah, so that's my thought, was rather than us pay capital. Yeah. We'll buy some of this transmission or something. Yeah, I know, it's their project. It's gonna be a transformer, I'll assume 2 breakers. Bunch of realignment. And so it's gonna be like a mini sub. Yeah, we'll just start, yeah. I know.
Like them, I would think they would have backup.
And I mean,
They're gonna send all this. I know, I mean, for themselves, I mean, I would think they would keep something back on themselves. Like us, if we go, like us, if we go somewhere, it's gonna get snow. Because we're not gonna send everywhere. We need to still protect the city. So we'll send minimum amount of gas. Each system, and once it's under control, we'll go to their month.
And then they double it.
Well, like how it works, because obviously you have idea. And a lot of times with remote, so if they help us out, they'll bring everything with them.
What happened?
They may not use everything. If they did something, they.
What would happen that way is,
In like Valley, they only send
then you have everything
flat fires.
and then we have
5
13
people.
just split the sub. So then we didn't have enough.
I would think so.
That's
That's
what it said. That's what it said. No.
Like us.
Exactly.
Like us, we go somewhere, it's just skeleton. Just not to help them out.
Good, how are you?
You never know, it's got, you know, it's still, it should be rewound, it's price now. Yeah. This is also. No, it's not.
Yeah, but you're not there. It's the side. I know it's not. It's one of the.
Feels about every step.
Yeah.
Nominate committees in their house. Guess who's getting nominated? What is he called? Yes. A year later. I'm good back there.
Some hydrocarbons.
Mhm. 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 All right, everybody, welcome. We'll go ahead and get started here. We'll call the special city council meeting to order. The Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. At this time, we'll have roll call.
Please cast your vote for roll call. Seven council members are present, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Item 1 tonight, we are continuing our budget discussions from last meeting, the large project discussion, part 2 of our biannual budget discussion. So at this time, I'll again turn it over to our Director of Finance, Jody Sanders, to begin the process for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, Jody Sanders, Director of Finance for the City of Fremont. In my staff report, I've outlined some issues or some discussion about the list of the large projects that we identified. For the city large project list, I left it at projects that were on the capital improvement plan provided by city staff. Those projects that were $1 million or more. Typically, we can find the funding for smaller projects, but this, because of the size of the project and the size of the ask, we thought it appropriate to defer to council in terms of, obviously, we couldn't possibly do all of those projects in 1 year, but we're looking for some help and direction in what does the council view as kind of our top priorities? What do we need to spend our resources, throw our resources against, and in what order? One of the conversations that I've heard since the last meeting was the question about why was there nothing on there for the fire department? And at this time, when we did the capital improvement plan, the notion was that we wouldn't have a study back in time. And so, once that study that's already been commissioned comes back in, we might look at either amending a budget, or is it something that we can do in the next 2-year budget cycle? But the report will give us some guidance on that. So we've kind of set that aside for our discussion tonight. It's not something that we'll need to concern ourselves with at this point. The list that you see on the board over there is the same with one exception from last time, and that's I took out the Broad Street project that after further discussions with our Public Works Director, Dave Godekin, that would be reimbursed mostly by the state anyway. So it's not necessarily a project that we need to look at where are we spending our resources. If we want to go ahead and get to the voting, if you will, excuse me, it's not voting, it's prioritizing, prioritizing projects. You each were given 10 stickers. There are 14 projects up there. You have the opportunity to put, if you choose, all 10 stickers on one project, spread them around if you choose. Councilmember Jensen, who's not here this evening, sent an email to Council President Mark Legband and Mayor Joey Spellerberg to identify what his projects were. So just to kind of get us started, I'll go ahead and put his votes up there. So that you would have basically the full council then voting. We also have, you all have blue stickers. There are 4 of us on city staff that have yellow stickers, and we will vote also. You'll be able to see, we'll be able to see, you know, council priorities versus staff priorities, that kind of thing, up on the board, but we could go ahead and start that. Brian, did you have something you wanted to add?
Questions? Does anybody, and Dave, I want Dave to say a few words about the $10 million 23rd Street to Jaeger alignment, but are there any questions before we do this?
Councilwoman Ganem?
Maybe not a question, but a request. Could someone just brief us on what, on each one that we're going to be voted on before we make our final decisions? I know the history and background on some, but many I don't. And so I don't feel as though I'm qualified to rank it. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Joe, do you want to kind of go through them?
So the first project listed is the Joint Law Enforcement Center. It is an issue that had been presented to the voters previously and was voted down. At that time, we were looking at a property tax to pay back the public safety bonds for that. There are other financing options, including imposing an additional half-cent or 1/4% sales tax to pay for it as well. The need for improved conditions at the police department didn't go away because the voters did not vote for that. So that's why we're bringing it back for consideration. One note, the $22 million that you see there is the total project. The city share
58%.
about 58% of that 22 million. The next project is a new splash station feature. That was also something that was brought forth to the community, and they voted it down when we voted for the auditorium bonds and the library bonds. Not necessarily identified at this time what that might be. Could be a lazy river. I'm trying to think of what else. An additional slide, the wave rider, flow rider kind of thing. That's still up for debate, but if it's something that, you know, council feels that we need to be reinvesting some of our resources into that project that's out there, rather than let it stagnate, that's the question that's before you tonight. As an alternative, we considered a neighborhood pool that would be located somewhere opposite of Ronan, because Ronan is fine and still in existence. But, you know, there's still the concern of kids going all the way out to Splash Station. And if you've driven by Ronan, you can see that it's pretty well utilized during the summer. This particular, if to get a pool of that size in terms of the dollar amount, would be 0 depth, so 0 entry. And then I think Nate mentioned something about a more of a diving pool on one end of it. And some, you know, to make it ADA accessible, but yet something that the neighborhood kids would like to ride their bikes to. The next project,
Quiet zones.
the quiet zones. Those are something that's been on the council radar for quite a number of years. In fact, when we did this process 4 years ago, quiet zones were on there and got a fair number of votes, but not to the extent that it was a project that was moved forward at that time. The next several, does anybody have questions about quiet zones? I'm just assuming because we've done this before.
And I don't think 1.8 million, Dave, will do all the quiet zones in the town, in the city, will it? I don't think that's a good start, but I don't think that's enough. Is it 1.8 million?
To get started, that would be it. It's somewhat undetermined on what you would have to do with quiet zones, because when you establish a quiet zone study, essentially the Department of Roads in the city and in this case, the UP Railroad get together and they work on that. And the undetermined a part of that is what the UP would then require. If they require interlinks between different intersections, the 1.8 probably is not going to get it. If they would look at each one by itself, it's possible that it would. That number is undetermined.
Dave, did you want to go through the rest of them? I mean, very briefly?
Yeah, I can.
Just in terms of because I think the rest of the projects are from your improvement plan.
Yeah, I can do that. Military Road, or Military Avenue, the next project on there is widening Military Avenue from Luther Road to Johnson Road. The next project is 32nd Street, Jaeger to Buckingham. This would be a new street extending existing 32nd Street from Jaeger Road east to Buckingham, and Buckingham is the proposed easterlymost street in the Tech Park plat. And the item after that is 32nd Street from Buckingham to Luther Road. This project has been in our 1 and 6 for several years as from Jaeger to Luther, and I guess it's on here, and then it splits it into 2 different projects then. The next one is Clarkson Street, 6th to 23rd Street. That would be asphalt. Mill off the existing asphalt, make concrete repairs as needed, and then put down a new 2-inch asphalt overlay. 23rd Street, Jaeger alignment. This is one Brian mentioned earlier to discuss the number there. When we originally looked at that, I guess I looked at it as put the number in there as kind of the worst case scenario. It's very undetermined what we would need for right of way on this project to connect those 2 streets. You're probably ending up extending Bell Street into the what's now parking lot of the mall, and then curving over and tying into Jaeger Road. Definitely is going to involve purchasing right away, but when we first looked at that years ago, it was not necessarily known how the Village Inn aligns up with the new alignment of the street. So to just do the construction of paving and kind of assume value for right away, you're probably looking at about 3 million, but not knowing what businesses would have to be purchased or what accommodations would have to be made for those businesses. I put that larger number in there.
Hey, Dave, but one of the initial plans is to remove Wendy's, remove the Village Inn, and curve it more to the south of 23rd Street.
Yes.
That project at the time, I believe, and this is what, 10, 15 years ago?
No, it would have been about 6 years ago because I made the presentation
Okay.
to the
Wasn't it
council.
about 10 million just for that?
Yes.
And now that cost us more like 15 or more.
Yes, I mean, that would have involved purchasing and relocating
2 businesses.
2 businesses, yes. And that's where it really starts getting expensive,
Very expensive.
high dollar. Now we're more concentrating on a northerly route to have less impact on existing businesses. The next item, let me find my place here again. Luther Road, Military Avenue to 23rd Street. That's a project that's been on the books for quite some time. That's improving Luther Road from Military to 23rd Street. That would involve building new curb and gutter, filling in the ditches, installing a better storm sewer system in there, and then improving the intersections with larger longer turning lanes on the major intersections like 16th Street and Military Avenue. First Street from Bell to Luther, that's a reconstruction of that section of roadway in there of First Street from Bell to Luther. And the original look at this project also had a trail along that segment. This one has been partially designed by an engineering firm, but the plans have just been put on hold since that time.
That's an asphalt overlay.
No, that's new construction.
That's new concrete.
But there is sections of that road that are new. So we would not be replacing those. We would only go into the sections that are the older sections that are in bad shape. Pierce Street and South reconstruction, that's for the that gravelled section of Pierce Street and South Street, essentially south of Military down to South Street. Pierce Street from Military to South Street, and then South Street from Pierce Street to, I believe it's Garfield or not Garfield. I wrote it down here. Hold on. Summers, I'm sorry. So from Pierce to Summers. And then that's currently gravel, and that would be to pave and then build storm sewers in there. Maybe not all at once, but pieces at a time
So
as well.
why would we not do a paving district for something like that and do a combination paving district in the city?
That would be, I guess, the council's choice. I mean, this being more of a major street may not be fully funded with a paving district. You could probably do a combination of both. The next project is Lincoln Avenue from 23rd Street to First Street. Again, this is an asphalt overlay, mill out the existing asphalt, make concrete repairs, and then put down a new layer of two inches of asphalt. And the last item here is Railroad Avenue and Claremore storm sewer and street construction, reconstruction. Again, this is a gravel road section down there. There are some storm sewer issues in that area, and that would be to pave and build the storm sewer system in that area.
Yeah, but again, that should be a paving district, I think, because that's mostly businesses down there.
Yes, that could also be done as a paving district as well. When I look at these, I don't necessarily look at them as being, whether they're being a district or not. I look at them as a project and the funding or the cost of the project.
That would be a good opportunity for me to toss in a little bit. On the worksheet that was included with the agenda, you can see that there is a column that shows possible funding sources. The reason why I didn't have it on the list here for you to vote on what funds we will use. Typically, city policy is that we would use the most restrictive dollars first. And by that, I mean, for the street projects, we can use gas tax dollars, we can use sales tax dollars. We could even use general fund dollars. But we could not use street fund or gas tax for the neighborhood pool, for example. So when we go through, once we get through this exercise, city staff will take a look at, okay, this is the most important project. What is the most restricted fund we can use for that? And we'll use that fund to the extent that we feel comfortable, if there's reserves involved, that kind of thing, and move down the list to as long as the funding lasts. So that's why, you know, the question about should it be bonded, should it be, we'll have that, we will have that conversation, but that will come later once the priorities are identified and we see where the funding is.
Councilman Legman.
It'd be kind of nice to know if it could be use of tax or somewhere else, because it would make a difference in my voting, like the quiet zones and things like that, that I know that tax money can't be used. I would like to do that. I don't mean to minimize some of those other things, but I feel that's very important to get these road work done, the infrastructure done. And that's the way I'm probably going to vote, is get this infrastructure done. But do I think we should have a quiet zone? Do I think we should have the neighborhood pool or something added? Heck yeah, but I probably won't be able to put a sticker on it right now because I think the infrastructure is more important right now. So.
Well, and that helps inform, you know, if let's just make an example. I use the neighborhood pool as an example. If street paving and storm sewers and all of those things are what's first and foremost on council's mind, we can use general fund reserves to pay for streets. That's acceptable. You just can't go the other way and spend gas tax on some kind of like a park and rec or library kind of thing. So that's where we're asking you is where's what's most important to you, and then we'll work through the funding and bring it back for consideration.
Councilman Ellis.
Jody, I've got a couple of concerns here, questions. First of all, you said what's important to us. You know, as a councilman, I'm voted into this position by the citizens of Fremont, and I'm seeing a lot of things that are not on that list that are concerns to our citizens. You mentioned that the fire have a study going on right now, and so we're not even looking or putting any money towards the fire. Do we not have a study going on right now for the police? For the joint law enforcement, is there not a study going on? So why is that one on the list, but the fire didn't make the list, even though both of them have studies going on?
The only thing I can answer is that when,
Okay,
I mean, it's simply a matter of, it wasn't on the chief's list, capital improvement plan, because he knew the study was happening.
so I've just heard a lot of citizens that says, didn't we vote the joint law enforcement center down? Why can't we just go with the police station? So why isn't just a police station on here? That is my concern is, you know, there's so much people and the citizens that are concerned about flooding. And we don't have anything set aside for drainage studies here. And I think that would probably be top priority for a lot of our citizens. So I'm really frustrated that this list was generated with no council input. And we're supposed to simply just put our stickers on a list that was made up without our input, without the citizens input. You know, something like this was done in 2017. Do you remember that, the study? Do you remember the very last project that got the least amount of support? Was the airport terminal. And how did that airport terminal become priority for our city and took priority over everything? So right there, it tells me that no matter what I put on here, it's not going to really matter, that there are going to be issues or line items on here that doesn't really matter what we say here tonight, that it will take place no matter what. So that's the reason I'm going to be boycotting the stickers tonight. I don't believe it is an issue. I think this is a rouge that's being put on to let the city think that the city council has some input. And I'm really frustrated that the city council has no input except putting stickers on a list here that wasn't even created by us. So extremely frustrated. I know there's things on here that shouldn't be on here, and I know that list is missing a lot of things that should be on there. So that's the point I'm trying to make tonight. It's extremely frustrating knowing that the council is not involved in this at all. Thank you.
So let me make a couple comments. You know, first, the Joint Law Enforcement Center, I asked the word joint be taken off. And we didn't make it because it's really just a law enforcement center, and you're voting for $11 million. You're not voting for the 22. You're voting for the city's share, 11 million. And that's where if we build our own, that's about what it's going to cost us. So don't think you're voting for a joint. You're not. You're voting for our center. Okay.
It's not put out there like that.
Well, I'm just telling you now, when you vote, it's $11 million, not 22, because that's our share. Okay. 2, the reason stormwater studies aren't on here, they're not a capital. We're taking care of those in the operations side. Okay. They won't end up on here. Okay. Jody and I talked today too. It's highly likely that we can use 4 million of the COVID money for storm sewer. Okay. If we get that clear defined and we get our stormwater study done, we will come back to you, which will take about 2 years. We'll come back to you using the 4 million COVID money to pay for some stormwater projects. Until then, Dave, would you recommend just going out and spending money on a stormwater project? Because we don't know what to fix. We don't know what's going to be the biggest bang for the buck. Let's wait until we get a stormwater study done first. Does that make sense?
Problem has been going on for many years.
Oh, it has.
We have a really good idea.
I agree.
Of what we can do to improve it immediately if we wanted.
Dave, do you know right immediately what you would do with stormwater that would just solve the problem?
So I'm not
No.
saying solve the problem. I'm saying
No.
make the problem better.
And remember,
We've spent some money just to clean the ditches out between here and the Elk Horn.
again, those are private property. We don't have, we can't do it if we want it.
All right. Listen, tonight, the point of tonight is these projects were identified before many of us by, Chief Elliott. This was on his radar. These are all already on the radar of the city. They're all good things. I mean, these are all things, these are public safety, and this is road improvements. Believe me, I drove these roads today with this list. And I went down Clarkson and I went down First Street. And I said, yes, they need to be done. The Jaeger intersection is a dangerous intersection for Fremont. That's a growing area. So the votes tonight, or the prioritization tonight, is not, an end all be all. We can't do everything. And stormwater is very important. We found that out. We had a 4-inch rain come down in a couple of hours. We understand that's important, and that is going to go in. It's just not a capital improvement plan in the capital projects. So, what I'm hearing out is public safety and infrastructure. And, these projects are identifying those ways we can improve public safety and infrastructure. The fire department is going to have public meetings coming up, and those will be very important and valuable. And we'll take whatever that study says, we'll come back. We'll consider what the study says. It's just not done right now. We got to go through the budget process right now as is. So, all we're asking council tonight is just make some priorities. And, that's all tonight is for. Councilman Yerger.
Well, that was interesting dialogue. And so I'd like to weigh in on a couple of things that I heard in light of the questions that I had. So I also was concerned about the fact that there's no fire station project currently included. And I guess, because of study. I agree with the statements made by Councilman Ellis in that regard. Then there is no completed law enforcement study. As a matter of fact, I don't think there's any completed quiet zone study. And I think that requires one by railroad and the like as well. So another study that's not completed. I don't know, was there others that needed to have a study? The street paving projects in some regard are tied to those. When I looked up the notes from the previous council meetings where we talked about budget, specifically the 32nd Street paving projects were tied directly to the law enforcement center, which was voted down by the public at both as to bond and location. And so why those would be high priority in light of what the citizens have already spoken on, and in light of the fact that the law enforcement center, whether it's joint or not, needs the study completion, those seem to be ill-timed to be on there. I'm glad that there was a discussion and that Councilman Ganem asked for, well, what are these projects? Because I had that same question. Are you resurfacing the roads, constituting whole new concrete? So I'm glad that Mr. Godek gave us some information on that regard. But and I think, Jody, you indicated also that these were put on this list because they were over $1 million. My question is, yeah, they made the list because they're over $1 million, but how did they make the list in the first place? Were these the highest priorities recommended by staff, or just those that were carried over from previous discussions because they were over $1 million? Because as budgets and needs for the city change over time, the projects that we put on the list, whether they're the old ones or something new, as Councilman Ellis just described, saying, well, there are other things that we could or maybe should have put on here, but we weren't asked, and the public hasn't been asked. Maybe they're more important than some of the ones that are on here that have been carryover. So I am deeply concerned about that as well. The other thing that sort of troubles me is that council sits as elected officials to represent the public in this regard. And so far, the public, I don't think, has been polled on what do they think is the most necessary things. I'm sure drainage would come up, storm sewer management would come up as being a top priority for this city in many respects. And just, despite city administrator's explanation as to how we would go about it, it seems to me that there is a sequence in the way that you might do things. They'll be borne out by a study. But water typically flows in this town from northwest to southeast. So if you're going to do rehab, and let's say that you're going to do rehab on First Street, and let's say the First Street storm sewers are undersized, and you're going to pave or repair that street or overlay it again, and I know it's been overlaid a couple of times or repaired a couple of times, and not the too distant past, then we would want to resize as we go from southeast to northwest so as to not have to redo anything that we're doing along the way we shouldn't be doing work along Luther or First Street or in that part of town, not giving due consideration to what the study might say as to the proper storm sewer requirements that will be necessary there, or we'll have to tear it up and do it all over. So I'm troubled about some of the sequencing, but mostly I'm troubled about the fact that the public's not involved. I'm equally concerned about we're voting for popularity of the projects that were put on this list when we, the council, didn't add or have a chance to add to or substitute things on this list. The public didn't. And I'm equally troubled by the fact that as the elected officials, we might quote vote, but I'm wondering, why is the staff voting? We are the elected officials. You may have indicated what you feel are the appropriate projects to put on here, but why is staff weighing in on whether or not we should do them or not, rather than those that are elected and the public themselves as to, these are our highest priorities. So I'm concerned about the approach that we're taking. You know, I like the fact that we're airing this out. The other thing that I want to say in regards to this is, you know, these special meetings before city council meetings, I think are not the appropriate forum for this. I think that the budget is one of the most important things that the city council does on behalf of the citizens of Fremont. We're spending their money. We're earmarking what's important to get it done. We have the wherewithal to have special city council meetings on the off Tuesdays of every month, up until the time this budget is passed. And I would hope that we would take those times to do multi-hour meetings of significant length where the public could come as well as us, and we could talk and discuss about these things for a significant period of time in order to hammer this out and to get, to the detail of some of this before we're asked to take a vote or put stickies on what we think is important. When many of the things that I see on this list, I would X off right away as to, man, I don't see this happening. For example, I'll use the Jaeger intersection as an example. That's a $10 million project, supposedly. It may cost even more than that in the end. We've looked at that for some time. City administrator has explained some of the things that we thought were approaches in the past, and we poo-pooed those and voted those down in previous meetings. So the one that he explained was the one that I think that survived. But my question is this: Lincoln Avenue is going and is already a collector street. At some point in time, that road will go straight north to 32nd Street. Why in the world we would want to spend $10 million on Jaeger Road intersection rather than to declassify that as a collector, make it a local street, and take the traffic over to the stoplight on Lincoln to go up to 32nd Street and create a square intersection rather than a jog through the parking lot, et cetera, to make that the street. Really seems kind of nonsensical to me for the money that we would have to spend. And we discussed that one and hammered it out and couldn't get any consensus on what to do about it the last time. And so when I look at the list, I'd go like, man, I'd take some of these things off completely from the get-go. And I'd be looking to put some other things that I don't even see on here now because we didn't ask the public, or if we did get input from the public, we weren't given an opportunity to put these on to substitute these items that are on here tonight. So I too don't think we're yet ready to vote on these items because I don't know that these are the items we ought to be considering yet at this point. I know we're within some haste to get things moving along, and I appreciate the budget needs to be on a schedule, but it's critically important that we do the will of the people here and to spend the dollars wisely. And I really don't think that we're ready to vote on these items tonight. So I share Councilman Ellis's concern and some of the concerns that have been expressed as well. I do thank staff for giving us the information that's helpful, but we need actually more information, I think, as to what other things really the public would prefer to have on here than the ones we see tonight. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, can I respond?
Sure.
A couple of comments. The exercise that we're doing was done in a budget study session in 2017. And at that time, it was city council and city staff all sitting around a table and talking about projects. And then we all had an opportunity to vote. To allay the concerns of the council, you all have blue stickers. I actually do have one set of blue stickers to put the votes on for Mr. Jensen, Councilmember Jensen. City staffs are yellow. So it will be easily discernible what did the council vote for versus what staff voted for. The exercise is to help everyone understand what are the large priorities in terms of what's not on the list. There's an entire capital improvement plan, 5-year capital improvement plan that you saw a version of in January. And it has many of those smaller projects that you've talked about. And many of the things that have been brought up to this evening are operational, such as a stormwater plan, doing the work to get a stormwater plan together. And also with the funding that, trying to decide how the funding shall be spent. There is a prioritization on the capital improvement plan that, for example, since many of those are public works projects, Dave has already designated those as, this is most important, this can wait a few years, and he's laid it out across the set of years. Again, this list is not what we will do in the next 2 years as a city staff. This is long-range planning. If you want to, I'll go back to the neighborhood pool just because that's what we keep talking about. If you want a neighborhood pool in 2026, what steps do we need to take to accomplish that? It doesn't have to be something that we're going to do first and second. And while I appreciate the boycott of the stickers because you think it's a silly exercise, I would urge you to the very notion of those where you said, I'm going to take, would just take some of these off the list. Your vote does that if you say, this is the most important thing I think needs to be done. Now, by boycotting, you're saying none of those projects deserve a vote. So I'd ask you to consider that when you're making your decision on whether or not you're choosing to show what your priorities are. The budget process has to be a two-way street. Staff can't do it all on our own in a vacuum. And we can't expect you to vote for a budget that you've had no input in. This is at least my way of trying to get you to focus on what are the large projects out there and what do you want to see done. We could spend hours and hours and hours if we all had that amount of spare time going through every single item on the capital improvement plan. The idea of this is, let's not talk about, do we need a pickup this year or next year? The idea is, how can I, as a finance director, lay out a revenue projection that can get us to accomplish the projects that council has just said, these are large projects that need our attention. If you choose not to vote, the presumption is you don't think any of those are important projects, and we go back to the capital improvement plan and then present it as the individual staff has provided that to you. I'm doing my best to try and communicate and make this a two-way street, and boycotting doesn't help that process. So.
Councilman Coons?
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of echo what you said. I think we're making a little too much out of this. This is an exercise, and we need to look at it as an exercise. We're not voting. We're suggesting that these are ahead of these others. You know, when you bring up the law enforcement center, the last time we did this, you know, most people know one of my projects that I was really focused on was the city auditorium upgrades, and that got very, very few votes. But yet, due to the extra hard hours that Kim Goski put in and Lottie Mitchell put in to find appropriate funding, that got put on a front burner. And I think those are the things that we're trying to achieve here. Let's just get the ball rolling. Let's start with city staff. I'm not an engineer, so, you know, I want to hear what Dave's got to say. I know the stormwater runoff there's no easy solution to that. There may not be a solution to it. We live in a flat zone. You know, and it just, it's one of those things you can't really prepare for 4 to 6 inch rain all at once. You just can't build a big enough system for that. So, you know, I think this is just an opportunity for city staff and council to look at these together and kind of see where we want to go from here. Sure, there's other things that should be on here, and that's what we can go over later on. You know, this is just to get the ball rolling, and I'm very comfortable with doing this, and I appreciate your work and what city staff has put into this, and I will vote.
Okay, we're at 6:40 right now. For the sake of time and moving this along, I would like to move to priorities, and we could go ahead and get this done. We got utilities to talk about. We got a meeting to talk about. So let's take, it shouldn't need more than 5 minutes. If you wish to vote, if you wish to prioritize, we'll take 5 minutes and go ahead and put them up there. And we'll come back and go over the utility side.
Oh, not sure if that would.
The goal. We got an hour, so the goal was to have the elected officials tonight go up and there's public comment next meeting. I mean, we have
unless somebody from public said they're like the fire station. Regardless of which is a study, we're bringing up what we did in 2017. Which is still. And then also, regardless if we speak English. I just wish you was during the discussion.
I used to.
But let's go ahead and get going here. Thanks for all participating. Thank you, Jody, for your help. We have to get to the utility side at this point, so I'm gonna go ahead and if whoever wants to start, Troy, talk about the utility capital improvement plan.
Mayor, can I ask a question before you do that? Just for what we just went through. So there were 4 staff members that went to the board. Were they voting for only themselves or were they voting for other people that aren't here?
Staff was just voting for themselves.
Really?
Okay, go ahead, Troy. Floor is yours.
Okay, Troy Shaven, Assistant City Administrator Utilities. I'll briefly go through these and kind of explain what they are. If you have any more detailed questions, we have some additional staff behind me that maybe can answer more in-depth questions. But first one is ELG implementation. That's effluent limitation guidelines. I think we've come to you for engineering for this. It's basically a regulatory response to changes in how we dispose of our ash. Right now, we take our ash, it's combined with water. It's basically pumped under First Street into a lagoon. And then there's a baffle system set up and basically the lagoon fills up, the water flows into the Rawhide Creek. This rule says that ash cannot kind of come into combination or cannot come into contact with any water. So it's implementing a system where we have to take the ash across the street dry. That's for a $4.5 million project. 50T emergency black start generator. That's 50T is the ID number for the Darrell Marshall gas turbine. What that is as strange as it sounds, it takes electricity to make electricity. If we were ever to get to a point where we were completely off and we had no ties to the outside world, the only way we would be able to start any of our generators is with another generator. And so what that is that's a diesel generator that we would use to start the gas turbine that would provide us with emergency power in the case that we were disconnected from everything else. The coal handling thaw shed has to do with the way the railroad is addressing their loss of business, I'll say. Originally, I think we took 102-ish car trains. That's been bumped up to 122. They're looking at more now. Basically, what that means is we have to offload more coal per train than we normally would. In the past, we have not taken trains in the winter, but if we have to offload more trains and fewer trains, we don't have the capacity on site to store all that coal. And so what we would have to do is we'd have to start taking winter trains. And a coal thaw shed is exactly what it sounds like. You'd pull the cars into the coal thaw shed. That coal will freeze in transport. You basically bring it into the shed, it thaws the coal. We unload it from there. That's due to the railroad. Unit 8 generator stator rewind. We will do periodic inspections on our unit 8 generator. When we open it up, we'll look at it, see if the coils need to be rewound on that. We have not had to do the stator since it's been in existence. We have had to do the field generator once. That's kind of when we get it open, we look to see what it looks like. And if we need to do it, we'll do it. The past few times we've opened it up, that stator has looked really, really good. The sub transformer addition is for additional transformers at the substations due to growth around the city. With the vertical cold storage going in, our sub B, sub C substations are approaching their limits. So what we would do is based on growth. I think sub C, sub D, sub E, and sub G all have available capacity for an additional transformer. Based on where the town grows, we would put another transformer in. Right now, we're planning on 2 additional transformers, so 2 of those substations. If all of a sudden we stop growing, we would not do that. But right now, I think with the way the growth is going out right now, it looks like maybe sub C is probably the best shot for maybe the first one of those, and then it would depend on growth. The new substation is again based on growth. Don't know where it would be. It's just if we were to get another large customer, if we were to get a large development on one side of town where one of the substations is maybe overloaded, that would be for growth. We would put that wherever it's needed. The horizontal wells for the past budget cycle, and I think past budget cycle, we had money in there for 3 new wells at the well field. Those wells are vertical wells like you'd think is a normal well. The horizontal well, what it does is it's actually a large tube that goes down and then it spirals out horizontally at the bottom like a wagon wheel. Rather than put in the 3 wells that we have budgeted, we would go with 1 horizontal well. That 1 horizontal well will provide about 5 times the water that a single well would provide. And so what you end up doing is you get a horizontal well that allows you to run basically your entire town, and it never has to be shut off for maintenance, because what you do is you do the maintenance on the individual wagon wheel spokes. The middle is always open, so it really never has to be shut off. That is due to increase in our water usage over the past 15 or 20 years, and also due to not wanting or needing to replace some wells that are getting old and some additional wells that are having manganese issues. The chemical filtration treatment is out at the well field. We're getting to the point where our capacity on our west transmission line from the well field is about at capacity. When you shut off the east, we have 2 transmission lines from the well field. One is on the west side, which basically runs down. If you were to extend Luther Road straight south to the well field, It basically runs through there. And then the other one pretty much runs straight out of the well field towards 275, and then it runs up on the west side of 275. The east, or the west main is the one that goes into the water treatment plant. That's the one we bring most of our water in to town through. When we shut that west, or when we shut that east line down, the capacity of that west line is about at capacity. And so we would either have to do another smaller chemical treatment plant on the east line, or what we would do is, in combination with the horizontal well, in order to do the horizontal well, those horizontal wells by regulation have to have filtration, because those horizontal wells generally, there's a concern about groundwater, under surface water. Basically what it says is there's a concern that those horizontal wells are taking contaminants from the surface on a horizontal well, because they're generally not as deep, and it gets sucked down into the well. So a general requirement of that horizontal well is a filtration system that's about $2 or $3 million. So what we would do is we would build a full-scale water treatment plant with filtration that would address our aging wells, it would address our capacity, it would address our manganese and our iron issues. The next one is the Cedar Bluffs water main upsizing. We're in the process of that one right now. We're having the engineering done to the, we're going to sell water to Cedar Bluffs. They got an FDA grant for that. As part of that, we upsize our mains. Anytime we extend main like that for future growth, for service to future areas, our goal is that we would be able to get to the other side of the river and start providing water to the golf course, to the subdivisions on the south side of the river. Phase 2 of the wastewater treatment plant upgrades, that's due to the Holstone. I believe we had the agreement come in last time. That bid came in at $21 million. I think $10 million is being paid by Holstone. Odor control at the wastewater treatment plant. As the city grows, eventually we're going to get across 275. Anybody who's spent any time near that wastewater treatment plant knows it does not smell very good. So there aren't going to be very many people that want to build over there until we do something about it. The $4 million would cover basically, it's called a geofiltration system. You basically cover anything that's emitting odor, pump it into this geofiltration system, which is a hole in the ground filled with those little black pellets you see on the football fields, and then covered with dirt. And then about every 5 years, you have to open it up. Those pellets absorb the odor. You dispose of those pellets, you fill in new pellets. And that would eliminate probably 75 to 80% of the odor from the wastewater treatment plant. The cost of those pellets is probably $100,000 to $150,000 every 5 years. Enterprise software replacement or upgrade. Jody could probably talk more about that, but that's the replacement of our software, our purchasing software, our SunGuard system.
The SunGuard, so it would be basically enterprise-wide.
It's a replacement of our main operating system that the city uses for billing, work orders, everything like that. And I can take any questions you have. That was quick, I know.
And we don't rank these. We don't need to rank these because honestly, we need to do them all. It's just a matter of when we're going to do them.
Councilman Yerger.
Well, I see that there is some ranking here. If we look at the timing and priority, you've listed some items as being 22, 23 versus others that are 24 out to 26. So I'm assuming that gives some priority to what the utility side feels these projects need to be done in. Is that
the way I can explain that? It's a best guess based on what we're projecting as growth. What we see is probably when that'll need to be done. Obviously, you get a large customer come in, all of these things could change. I mean, the odor could move to the top tomorrow if somebody comes in and says, I want to build this plant next to the wastewater treatment plant. You know, I want to do this. You know, those are discussions you have when they come in, and you know, like the rest of the budget, we try to project out 5 years, but it's really, you know, it's a best guess. And if some things move up a year, move back a year, That's not uncommon.
I thank you for doing that. I thank you for the explanations or rationale that you gave associated with these projects tonight. One of the things that I would ask to be thought about relative to the budgeting process, the transcription of what we just heard from Troy with relative to these projects and the discussion that we had relative to those that were on the city side as well. That kind of discussion detail would be very helpful as backup material for future reference. That is, I think we need to get that down in writing associated with each of these so that we as council members can look back at the discussion, that the city would be able, the citizens would be able to look at rationale for some of these as well. Because it's important for everyone's understanding when we look at what are we going to spend our money on to understand what they are. The titles don't mean a lot to lay people, and historically they may not mean a lot to us a week or two from now if we don't have something to refer back to. So that'd be my plea. Could we please transcribe or document what we were told orally this evening? And it kind of tends to reinforce my earlier statement about the use of the off Tuesdays for special meetings, because this has been an informative meeting in many respects. The public didn't get a chance to weigh in or speak tonight on any of these matters. If we utilize those special meeting dates to do that, we could have longer and more robust discussion amongst council members themselves with staff on these issues, and the public would have a chance to weigh in. So I strongly encourage us to take advantage of that going forward. Thanks.
Any other questions for staff? I just want to thank staff for their hard work tonight, putting this together. This was a lot of work. The budget process is arduous at times and can be a lot of detail, and I appreciate all the hard work that staff has done, put this together, and for your efforts. With that, I would take a motion to adjourn the special city council meeting. Councilman Gibson.
So moved.
Councilman Legband.
I'll second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Meeting adjourned. Before we open up the regular council meeting, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll now open up the regular city council meeting. The time is 7:02. The Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. This time we'll have roll call.
Please cast your vote for roll call. 7 council members are present, Mayor.
Thank you. Next is mayor's comments. Don't have too much tonight. I just wanted to congratulate the city of Fremont, all the volunteers, the board of directors, those involved for putting on a very successful John C. Fremont Days. No, we had to take a break in 20 because of COVID, but they came back very strong. We had a great turnout. Had some rain, but that didn't let us get down at all. Many entries in the car show, great parade. I think the weather was probably the nicest it's ever been for the parade on Sunday. I don't think we've ever had it below 80. So just want to again thank all those involved for a great festival, and thank you for a great job representing Fremont very well. I also wanted to make the public aware. We are having 2 City of Fremont Fire Department input meetings. They will be at 7 p.m. on both July 14th and July 15th at the City Auditorium. So what we want to know is what fire services that you consider most essential, potential concerns for the fire department, service expectations in regards to your tax dollars, how the fire department can control costs while still providing quality service, and just overall expectations of the fire department. So again, those will be at 7 p.m. July 14th and 15th, which is this Wednesday and Thursday at the Fremont City Auditorium. That's all for my comments. We will move on to item 1. A motion to adopt the current agenda for the July 13th, 2021 regular meeting. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, I would take a motion to adopt the current agenda as presented. Councilwoman Ganem,
So moved.
Councilman Legband,
I will second that.
cast your votes.
The motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Now moving on to public hearings. Item 2, resolution 2021-092 for a Class C liquor license for Ortiz's Bars LLC doing business as Los Mezcales at 210 North Main Street. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor and council, we received the application that's in the backup from the state. There's a report included from our planning department and also a background from the police department. Notice of this public hearing was published in the Fremont Tribune on July 3rd, 2021. I believe the applicant is here or maybe available via Zoom. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Tyler. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing of resolution 2021-092. Are there any comments from the public? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Are there any comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
I just had a quick question for the applicant in reading through this pretty complete and thorough documentation filed by the applicant with regards to the request, but in the business plan, I just want to be sure that what's mentioned in the opening sentence is really perhaps a typographical. This is just going to be a restaurant and bar establishment. There's nothing unique with regards to the description that's here because I'm not sure what a CA bar is. I think it's a typographical. So this is just a bar and restaurant.
If the applicant's here, you can go ahead and state your name and address and come up to the microphone, please.
Hello, my name's Jose, address 1226 Heatherwood Drive here in Fremont. Regarding to that, it's going to be more like an appetizer bar. Restaurant, it's going to be probably more later on, but first we're going to start with more appetizers. So basically it's going to be a sit down bar where you get a drink, you'll get a small free appetizer. You know, during special days like Friday, Saturday, we'll have a special where you can get a margarita or a bucket of beer and you'll get free appetizers. We'll be getting basically it's just the appetizers. We'll have various types of appetizers from, I think we set up from 15 to 20 appetizers, and it's just that's going to be what we're going for right now. Later on in the road, once we get established and kind of know what the people are feeling more and what's called are liking more, we're going to be putting in more stuff. And what we're going for is more authentic Mexican food. I'm from Guerrero, from Acapulco. So we specialize, our cooking specialized more in seafood. So I want to bring in our authentic seafood to us and not make it a Tex-Mex. It's just going to be just a pure authentic food. The way we cook it, the way we eat it is the way I want to serve it to you guys. And that's what we're trying to hit for this.
Thank you for the clarification.
Sounds good. Any other comments from council? Seeing none, I would take a motion in regards to resolution 2021-092. Councilwoman Ganem.
I move for we accept resolution 2021-092 for Class C liquor license.
Councilman Coons.
I'll second that motion.
Cast your votes.
The motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now moving on to the consent agenda. All items in the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or a citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Are there any items to be removed from staff, public, or council in regards to the consent agenda?
Mayor.
Yes.
Just wanted to bring to your attention items 10 and 11 on the signature line for the mayor. I accidentally left Mayor Getchman's name in there, and so I have updated that with your name. I apologize for that. And so I don't think it's probably necessary to remove that for an amendment, but just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention.
Councilman Yerger.
I'd like discussion on item 7 and 9, please. And since the clerk has corrected items 10 and 11, I won't discuss those.
Are there any other items? Seeing none, I would take a motion to approve consent agenda items 3 through 6, 8, 10, and 11. Councilman Gibson.
So move.
Councilman Legban.
I'll second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Okay, moving on to item 7, a motion to approve concrete license applications for concrete modality and Cerati Construction. At this time, we'll have staff report.
Mayor and council, we receive concrete applications from these two parties. Their applications are included with their references there. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I believe Cerati, I think, is here, and maybe Concrete Modality as well. They're both here this evening if you have any questions for them.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
One is a general question with regards to applications, and we've had a lot of these, obviously, in the past. I probably should have asked this a long time ago. So when, in this particular case, these are for concrete licenses, but if they were for other trades that are not journey licensed by the state or whatever, do they have to have some sort of personal insurance plan as a part of what's required when they make applications? Are they on record with having insurance with regards to the work that they perform on behalf of the citizens?
So I believe the purpose for this section of code, Fremont Municipal Code 10-322, it focuses on work in the right of way. And so as a part of that, they're required to have a bond of $5,000 in place in the event they damage something that's in the right of way. And so that's kind of the focus here. A lot of these, if they haven't done business in Fremont before, they wouldn't have one of these licenses in there to submit. And so, we don't really have a good, clear understanding of their track record and the work that they do. But, that information comes back to council. And if you receive that, they are renewed on an annual basis. And that's something you can communicate to staff if there's issues, our building and codes department, things like that.
Part of the reason for my asking the question, I do have a question for one of the applicants, just based on the information that was filled out in the license application. And so I don't want to misstate the name. Is it Cerati?
I think I mispronounced. Is it Zerat?
Cerati?
Cerati.
So I just have a general question there in the application. It indicates that the applicant has a year's worth of experience, but those working for will have considerably more experience relative to laying concrete. So I'm assuming that this technically is for a contractor's license almost. And so I wanted to explore that a little bit with regards to the experience level that's here. And that's why I asked the question about insurability and the deliverables to the citizens that would hire. And so I'm wondering if the applicant could give a little bit more information relative to their experience level, relative to not just general contractor work, but the work in general cement work.
My name is Maria Cano. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. My English is not really high, but I want to try to explain you. We have any with our company into September last year. I'm starting my own company. I went to school for general contractor and business. I'm finished, and then I'm starting my company in September. We're looking for opportunities, and somebody in here in Fremont, they give it to us the opportunity for work in cement. So it's why we trying to get the license.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? Seeing none, are there any additional comments from council? Seeing none, I take a motion to approve the concrete license applications. Councilman Coons,
I make a motion to approve the license application.
Councilman Sukram.
I'll second that.
Ready? Cast your votes.
The motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 9, a motion to authorize the mayor to sign amendment number 1 for the MS4 program support agreement with Felsberg, Holt, and Ulevig. This time we'll have staff report. I think I got that pronunciation right.
Yes,
Okay,
I always say FHU.
that's good idea.
This is an agreement that we have with FHU, an engineering firm. They are working with us to satisfy our requirements for our MS4 program. That's our stormwater program that we have for the city. Essentially, this is our stormwater quality. This is not stormwater quantity, flooding, et cetera. This is for erosion control, pollution in the waterways, et cetera. We have an original contract with them this year. It was the amount of $34,471. We ran into a problem with the budget on that. The budget, I mean, with FHU. We are asking for an increase to $52,146, which is a total net increase of $17,675. Primarily, this was due to the fact that the city unexpectedly got audited by the EPA last year, and some of our efforts were rechanneled into preparation and follow-up of that audit. So this will update their contract or supplement their contract so that we can accomplish the initial goals that we had for this program and kind of start implementing some of the things that we think are going to come out of the audit.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger?
Well, I had this one pulled, and so I have a document I'd like to have received into the record, please.
Take a motion to receive. Councilman Ellis. Motion by Yerger, second Ellis. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
The document that I entered into the record essentially is something that we discussed in procedural matters at the last meeting with regards to the use of motions versus resolutions. And this particular item, when it was originally approved, was resolution 2020-247. And the mayor signed that resolution agreement. It was authorized back in December of 2020. And because it was an original resolution, and because I think it's good practice, and we've been recently admonished by the State Auditors Commission, our state auditor, to do a better job of documenting and being transparent in our agenda items, our minutes, and our records for what we're doing. I think this is far more appropriate to be stated in a resolution. So essentially, I took the information out of the staff report from what was presented in our packet material and transferred that into a resolution statement capturing the who are we paying, what are we paying for, the cost, et cetera, reference to the previous resolution so that they can be tied together. Also, the fact that this was approved by the Utilities Board back in June 29th of 2021, putting all of that information into a statement, which would be far too complex really for a motion, but significantly detailed to tie into what we had done originally. And so I would propose that we use this as a means of approving this evening, and ask the clerk beforehand whether or not he could bring resolution numbers to fill in the blanks. I also sent this to city staff to make sure that I had concurrence in the language that's here that came right out of the staff report. I don't know, Dave, if you have any comments this evening, but I didn't hear back for you before putting this in the record tonight. But it essentially covers everything that was in your staff report. It's not word for word in order to keep it briefer than your staff report, but the essence of all of the information, who, what, where, why, is all in here, and who recommended, including yourself and the UIB. And so that's the proposal that I would have to make to the council tonight, to adopt this resolution language rather than to make a complicated motion.
Are there any other questions for staff? Okay. Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
Hearing no other comments from members of city council, I would make a motion to approve the language set forth in resolution number 2021 dash whatever the clerk says.
So then next number would be 2021-098.
Councilman Legman?
Yes, is this procedurally okay if we do this? And staff, you're okay with this? Okay.
Dave, you saw this, correct, Dave?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
And you're okay with this?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, motion and second to adopt resolution number 2021-098.
That was Councilmember Yerger, seconded by Langman, right?
Yes.
As presented in the document. You ready? Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
All right, moving on to unfinished business. Item 12, Councilmember Ellis item, ordinance 5578, restricting parking near mailboxes. This would be for second reading. Councilman Ellis, if you want to speak on this, floor is yours.
Yeah, this again came to me from a citizen in Fremont that had their mailbox blocked by a neighbor for many days and tried to resolve it locally and could not. Call the police. They came out and said that they couldn't do anything because we have no ordinance. Chief Elliott and his officers did some investigating and found out that Columbus has the same ordinance in place. And so we just simply took what the city of Columbus had done, very vague. And that's essentially what the police chief here in Fremont wanted. If we start adding any more structure to this ordinance or this ordinance, I think it could be problematic. And that's the words I heard from a lot of constituents this week. They really like the idea of a parking ordinance that will not allow you to park in front of a mailbox. But as far as the length of space needed was very much contested by many people that I heard from. And so I would still be on the grounds that we simply keep it vague enough to let the police issue a warning and a ticket when needed, and not cause any more problems with neighbors marking 15 feet sections out or whatever. We're going to have a parking issue. You know, if we start taking that much curb space away from our neighbors. And so I think simply keeping this a vague ordinance and going, following Columbus's example, I'm still highly supportive of and would encourage us to go to second reading tonight.
Any questions for Councilman Ellis? Staff, is there any additional comments?
Yeah, Travis, would you weigh in on the enforceability of this? Because did you guys have a dialogue? You were going to look at it and see if there's other language. I submitted something I got from the post office, what their recommendation was.
Yeah, I spoke with Councilmember Ellis and Chief Elliott, and there's a direction that is being pursued here. I wouldn't classify, at least in this context, the ordinance as vague as a illustrative. And I think there could be language to shore it up a little bit. But just like last time, I think we could go to second reading and hammer it out. And if there are any issues with it, I'll let council know. But I don't see a problem going to second reading on this.
Councilman Yerger.
This would be second reading as originally proposed, then without any modifications to add language for 15 feet either side of the fire hydrant. That's off. We're back to the originally stated language from first reading. Is that what I'm hearing? Excuse me, mailbox, yes, not. fire
Yeah,
hydrant.
it would be the first, yeah, from first reading.
I
Okay,
think it would remain the same unless there's an amendment to, yeah.
just wanted to be clear on which version we were taking up. Thanks.
Are there any other questions before we move to public comment? This time we'll take comments from the public. Any comments?
Good evening. I'm Susan Jacobus. I live at 1805 North D Street here in Fremont. I can appreciate the issue about parking. And as you go through your subdivisions, et cetera, and you narrow up those streets, keep in mind what you can't park on one side of the street because you allowed homes to have double driveways and only 15 feet to park in between townhomes like you do on 18th Street, on D Street between 18th and 19th. You get irritated neighbors on the opposite side of the street. When they have company, they have no place to park. And you're not addressing curbside versus street side for the addresses that have mailboxes piled together in multiple tiers and they're off the sidewalk, but not on the curb. You haven't differentiated that in this language. So does that mean because there's a party mailbox of a dozen mailboxes that an apartment building shares and it's on the apartment side of the sidewalk that you can't park 15 feet on either side on that street? If you pass what was proposed on this language, you're going to create more animosity with some of the neighboring, but you also have it vague in here as well as on either side of the mailbox. Well, the mail truck wants to pull up and jump out and service those 12 sidewalk side mailboxes and then move on. Is that going to be included in this, or are we talking just those that are fed off the street? So that's something you'll have to decide when you get into second reading, but this is something that you have to have at least defined. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, are there any comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
Well, actually, I think a good point was just raised and I guess it's Councilmember Ellis's ordinance, but I do think there might be cause for an amendment to the language that says no person shall park any vehicle so close to any mailbox that the vehicle has access, blah, blah. It probably should say curbside accessible mailbox, because if the mailbox is not on the curb directly, then the post office can't drive by without getting out of their vehicle. They have to get out and deliver the mail if it's not curbside anyway. So they shouldn't really have a problem or an issue getting their mail, but certainly for those that are curbside accessible, that's what this ordinance should get to. And I'm interested, I guess, in whether Councilman Ellis would agree that that might be an appropriate amendment to the language in section 5-424. Or if he likes the language as is.
Councilman Ellis.
Simply adding the word curbside in front of mailbox is very appropriate.
Then I would make that motion to amend the ordinance for second reading in order to include the word curbside ahead of mailbox.
That was a motion.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second? Councilman Legband.
I'll second that.
Okay, cast your votes to amend.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Now I'd take a motion in regards to the amended ordinance 5578 and to hold second reading. Councilman Yerger.
I make a motion to approve second reading as amended of ordinance 5578.
Councilman Legband.
Well, I'll second it, but I would like to hear what the post office has to say about this wording too. So before we get it to third reading, I'd like to make sure that they're okay with these changes also before I definitely okay this in the future. But it sounds good to me, but I would like to hear what the police and what the post office, if they agree to these changes also. So I second that motion.
We'll make sure we have that by third reading. Okay, cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Now moving on to new business. Item 13, motion authorizing the mayor to sign construction contract with M.E. Collins for Johnson Road South, Union Pacific Railroad crossing improvements. This time we'll have staff report.
Good evening, Dave Godikin, Director of Public Works. This item is I guess the step 2 of the Johnson Road paving project. Last year in 2020, we paved Johnson Road from Morningside Road to Jack Sutton Drive. We had some issues getting permits from the railroad for that piece that's within the railroad right of way. So rather than hold up the entire project for that permit, we paved the remaining portion last year. This is for that portion within the railroad right of way, which we now have permits for. We had 2 bidders. M.E. Collins Contracting was the low bidder, $274,219.10.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Legband.
Yeah, have you had this construction company do business with us before?
Yes, M.E. Collins did the airport approach apron or airport terminal apron, I'm sorry, last year. And they also, not for us, but for the state, did the Platte River Bridge project on Highway 77 5-6 years ago. They do a lot of work in this area.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Yerger.
Once again, I have some documents I'd like to have entered into the record, please.
Is there a second? Councilman Ellis. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Before discussing the document that I handed out, a question for staff. The paragraph 4 of the contract, it says that the bid is included as an attachment. But I didn't find that bid attached to the contract copy that I had in my material. Was that to be included? Do I just not have it in what I have in front of me? There is certainly a reference that says attached there too.
The bid is not been attached. I mean, it's available if you would like to see it. It's basically the proposal packet that they submit that when we open bids, it's that packet.
My only concern is the document that we're going to be approving says that it's attached here too, and I would want to make sure that it's part of the public record.
Okay.
Secondly, the material that I handed out again is a resolution to replace any discussion of just a simple motion. This document, again, does the same as the one that we discussed before with regards to being more transparent, takes the information right out of the staff report once again. I'm assuming that Dave didn't have any objection to it. I didn't hear, but it codifies in the whereas statements, the information that was in his staff report. Again, the treatment that it was given at the UIB and all the requisite items that are pertinent to a resolution. So the resolution calls for the mayor to sign this. I would ask the clerk for a resolution number for council to consider taking this as a resolution rather than a direct motion that would be convoluted again.
2021-099.
Are there any other questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
Hearing none, I would move approval of resolution 2021-099.
Just to be clear, Dave, you saw this as well.
I just, yes.
Okay. Councilwoman Ganem? All right, cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Okay, moving on, item 14. Resolution 2021-096, approving the closure of Fifth Street between Main Street West and the alley at the request of Lund Ross Constructors, Inc. for demolition work to the 505 building. This time we'll have staff report.
Dave Godekin, Director of Public Works. One correction to this item, the insurance certificate that is in the packet does not list the city as a co-insured. I did receive that document today and gave it to Tyler this afternoon, so that is on file now. It's the same document, it just lists us as an insured as well. This project, or not necessarily a project, request came from the contractor Lund Ross. We received that. Actually, the request came after the last city council meeting, the last UIB meeting. And they are going to be remodeling, refacing, placing new windows on, re-roofing the 505 building. And it's going to require them to set up cranes, scaffolding, etc. And this particular building has a basement that extends out under the south side of the building, and actually the sidewalk and part of the parking area on Fifth Street westbound is the roof or ceiling or directly over top of that basement area. So they're really are restricted where they can put their outriggers for their crane, and restricted as how they place their scaffolding, etc. And to do this project safely and get everything in place and their dumpsters and their equipment, they really do need to close off Fifth Street, which means you're closing off the sidewalks on both sides of the street. You're closing off parking on both sides of the street, and obviously closing the street. And that will be from Main Street to the alley. And their request to do that is from this year. They want to start this week from this year, or July of this year through July of next year, 2022.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
Yes, I'm anxious for this work to get started, so I'm glad that this was here. I had some discussion with the clerk prior to tonight's meeting, but I'm still looking at the resolution language and the original request from the applicant, and I want to make sure we get this resolution worded appropriately. Their request was to block off 2 stalls on Main Street and Fifth Street from Main Street to the alley. That was their request. And I-
Yes,
and
yes,
I-
as
I
is-
think the clerk confirmed that in fact they want the 2 stalls in front of the
That's
building
correct.
as well as Main Street to Fifth. But I don't believe the resolution is clearly stated in that regard. And so I would suggest we need to further amend that to be perfectly clear. We're granting authority to close the 2 stalls on Main Street as well. You agree with that?
They are closing the 2 stalls, and that is in their supporting documentation, their form or application that they fill out, the attached drawing. They're all basically part of that package, as a part of the request.
Right.
And then the resolution approving that request, I guess.
So if I could add, there was, I think Dave did provide an updated resolution, and when I read it, it says that temporarily close Fifth Street and restrict parking from Main Street west to the alley. And so I thought that that was going to address the parking stall issue. Is that?
It doesn't specifically isolate those 2 stalls,
Okay.
but you know, the drawing does. I mean, the documents all go together, I guess.
My concern, Dave, was that the drawing is not part of the resolution in and of itself. And so to me, that first whereas statement should state to temporary close Fifth Street and restrict parking for two stalls on Main Street and Fifth Street west to from Main to the alley would technically cover specifically what they've asked for in their request. Just to be clear that those 2 stalls are included, because we really haven't talked about parking stalls on Main Street in even the redraft here, and I just think it's not clear. So I'd like to correct that in the first whereas statement, and also then to repeat that in the now therefore be it resolved statement to ensure that the 2 stalls on Main Street are specifically identified.
Okay,
You're okay with that?
I'm fine with that.
We can do that later after the rest of the.
All right, any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? I just want to say, I as well, I'm looking forward to the 505 building finally getting under construction. It's been years, maybe over a decade, and to have this day, get to this point, it's pretty exciting for downtown. And so it's a great project. I'm glad it's starting, and great. It'll be great to see what it is when it's finished. So is there any other comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
I have one before I would make that motion to amend, and it's a question really for Dave. It's not addressed in the application specifically that I saw. And so I'm wondering logistically, when we close the street on Fifth Street, I'm assuming that sidewalk will be closed on the north side because we're closing the whole street. Will the sidewalk be open to public traffic on the south side?
No, it will
The
be,
entire street and
it will-
sidewalks will be
every-
inaccessible?
everything will be entirely closed off. It would just be hazardous to
Okay.
have pedestrians. walk through
And
there.
what about then the sidewalk associated with the closure and the 2 parking stalls on Main Street? What happens to the Fifth
That will be
Street?
barricaded off as well.
So pedestrians wanting to use the businesses to the north of the 505 building will have access down to the 505
Yes,
building property?
yes.
Any concerns about how those with disabilities would get on and off the street at the southmost side? Or would they have to cross the street at the north side on 6th Street?
They, by their plan as it's laid out, they would have to come in from the north end.
Okay. And we don't have any concerns about that. We're okay with all of
I
that.
have more concerns of someone getting hurt. on
No,
the
no,
side.
I share that concern. I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure we had the necessary prerequisites in
Correct.
place for those that need access to
Correct.
ramp.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would go ahead and make a motion to amend resolution 2021-096. I'm sorry? I had sidewalks, okay. Okay, see if I can do that on the fly. So the whereas statement to open with, a request has been made to temporarily close Fifth Street and restrict 2 parking stalls on Main Street and sidewalks. And Fifth Street from Main Street west to the alley, including sidewalks. And then Tyler, in the now therefore statement at the bottom, that same language would reappear in that paragraph, so we don't need to repeat it. It would be the same. Is that okay, Dave?
Are you clear on this, Tyler?
Yeah, I think I have it. I'll go back and listen to the audio. and make sure I have it
Okay.
clearly.
Is council clear on what we're asking? Okay, that's my motion.
Councilman Legband.
I will second that.
Okay, cast your votes to amend.
Motion carries 7-0 to amend, Mayor.
Now I take a motion to resolution 2021-096 as amended. Councilman Yurger.
Make a motion to approve resolution 2021-096 as amended.
Councilman Sukram.
I'll second that.
Okay, cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 15, motion to authorize the mayor to sign contract with Southern Environmental, Inc. for Londi Wright coal handling modifications. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, Jeff Shanahan, Lonnie Wright Power Plant. This is for an agreement to basically do phase 2 of the coal handling modification project that started off when Union Pacific changed the length of train cars from 123 to 150. We did add the tracks last time. We then did a study to evaluate improved efficiency in getting the coal unloaded faster. We had many recommendations. These are the ones we chose, and we went out for bids for it. We only received one bid about a year ago, 8-9 months ago. So we went out for bids again, and we received 2 bids. Southern Environmental was the lowest bidder. They did offer some additional options for some of the concerns we had, where Midwest Mechanical did not give us any pricing on that yet. So what we're asking for is to approve the base bid and then allow us to, if necessary, go ahead and issue change orders for the options that they did have listed here.
If we need it, right?
If needed, right? Yeah, it
May
won't be
not.
if not needed. We won't do them.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yurger.
Again, I have a document to enter to the record, please.
Councilman Ellis. Cast your votes to receive.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Again, this document sets forth some resolution language in excuse me, in lieu of using emotion language. And I think in the conversations that Jeff and I had, it's clear that this is kind of a complex item in the sense that you want approval for the base contract to be approved, but you also need authorization in advance, if you will, for change orders that might be necessary on the fly, which wouldn't be timely to come back to council to get if in fact progress is underway and you need to affect one of those options 1 through 4, et cetera. So we're trying to get, excuse me, get that all captured into one motion. Recognize the fact that they went out for bids, recognize the fact that the UIB agreed at their June 29th meeting to not only the base contract, but to approve the options as may be necessary going forward for a total recommendation in their case of the 589,400. So this resolution language captures that same thing out of Jeff's report. Codifies, if you will, as part of the resolution, the background, what went on with regards to the bidding process, 2 bids, the selection of the lowest bid, the UIB's approval of this matter, and the fact that the council is actually approving 2 parts, the base bid and authorizing LDI staff or LDW staff to do the change orders as necessary up to the $132,000 300 limit that makes up the additional values of those options, realizing, of course, you could pick anything in between.
So that 132, I guess I didn't get a chance to look at that. Did that include?
That's the difference.
That's taking the deduct also?
That's everything that was in
Okay.
that list, including the $24,000 deduct.
Yeah.
It's just the difference between what the UIB approved at 589 and the base
bid.
price of
Yeah.
457. The rest of that's all made up of those four listed options. And you may or may not need any of that, and which is why it's stated in the resolution as they become necessary. And I think.
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
okay
we're
with
good
that.
with that.
So I would offer this to, for council's consideration as we discuss this item tonight.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you.
Yep.
Any comments from the public? Seeing none, any additional comments from council? Councilman Gibson,
I just want to know what the resolution number will be. 2021-.
100.
Thank you.
any other comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
If there are no other comments, I'd move approval of resolution 2021-100.
Councilwoman Ganem?
Second motion.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Moving on, item 16, motion to approve the recommendation of the mayor to appoint 3 city council members to the City County Joint Redistricting Committee. I'll do the staff report. I received a letter from Fred Mitty, Dodge County Clerk, every 10 years in regards to the census data. They go through a redistricting with the precincts as well as the wards. That committee would be set up with 3 Dodge County supervisors as well as 3 city council members. So I present to you the 3 city council members that I would appoint to this board. So I would ask if there's any questions. Seeing none, are there any comments from the public?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street here in Fremont. The question I had is I see representation from 3 out of the 4 wards. And in Fred Mitty's opinion, what are the wards that are going to change the most? I don't see Ward 2 changing a lot because of lack of expansion, but I could see Ward 3 drastically changing and Ward 1. So I was surprised that we don't have Ward 1 on here. I could see Ward 1 and 3 for sure. But I was a little surprised by that. So could you qualify your choice, or perhaps why we're doing 3 out of the 4 wards? My concern is that one ward, Ward 1, that has exponential growth that's slated, especially to the north. And along with Ward 3, with the expansion of Sunridge, Deerfield, Morningside, Fremont Commons, Brooks Hollow, et cetera, of course, that's got some exponential growth potential. But I was just a little concerned about Ward 1 and not having some kind of representation or voice in this.
Are there any other comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
So I am curious, in your rationale, Mayor, for what wards you did pick, since Ward 1 isn't one of those. And I realized Mr. Mitty said you can only have 3, so you had to narrow it down. Was there some rationale behind your decision to leave Ward 1 out, or these were just 3 individuals that you wanted to put on the committee?
No matter what ward I left out, I had to leave somebody out.
Right,
So
no, I'm just looking as, was there any underlying or just?
there was no other underlying rationale. I wanted as many wards on there and one ward had to be left out. So
Thanks.
Any other comments from council? I would take a motion to improve the recommendation of the mayor to appoint 3 city council members to the city county joint redistricting committee. Councilman Yerger.
I'd actually like to, I'm willing to make the motion to approve, but I'd like the motion to specifically indicate which council members are being appointed. So the motion I would make would be the motion to approve the mayor's recommendations to appoint city council members Sukram, Coons, and Ganem to the city county redistricting committee. If that needs to be in the form of an amendment rather than a motion, or I can just make the motion with the names in it, then I'm making the motion.
I do have a suggested motion written on the board for this item where I included their names. So if you'd
All
like
right.
to have that be the motion, that would probably be acceptable.
Yep, thank you.
Councilman Legman,
And I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Next item is item 17. A closed session to discuss potential property purchase and strategy session with respect to collective bargaining. Tongue twister. I would take a motion to adjourn into executive session. Councilman Gibson.
So moved.
He needs to.
Councilman Gibson, can you read the on one?
Okay. I move to go in executive session for the purpose of discussing potential property purchase and strategy session with respect to collective bargaining, and for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for protection of the public interest.
Councilman Legband. A motion has been made and seconded to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing potential property purchase and strategy session with respect to collective bargaining, and for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest. Is there any discussion? The pending motion is to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing potential property purchase and strategy session with respect to collective bargaining, and for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest. Please cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
A motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing potential property purchase and a strategy session with respect to collective bargaining, and for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest has been approved. Discussion will be limited to potential property purchase and a strategy session with respect to collective bargaining. No official actions or votes will be taken during the executive session. The property purchase will have mayor, city council, city administrator, assistant city administrator, and city attorney. The collective bargaining portion will have mayor, city council, city administrator, assistant city administrator, city attorney, Jennifer McDuffie, HR director, Dan Goebel, and Chief Elliott. We'll now go to the back conference room.
We open at 8 a.m. Okay? Thank you. Sorry to wait around.
That's fine. This was, this is the first time, and then I can learn more.
Okay, good. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Time is now 8:37. I would take a motion to come out of executive session. Councilman Gibson,
Got a motion?
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Moving on now to item 18 is a resolution 2021-097 to authorize city staff to make purchase of property located at 230 West 9th Street. Is there a staff report on this item?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Shane Weimer, Assistant City Administrator on the city side. As you know, we've been in negotiations with an individual who owns the property of 230 West 9th Street, Fremont, Nebraska, which is a house just adjacent to or west of the city auditorium. We're in negotiations to purchase that property for future city use. I had permission to go out and speak to that individual, being Mr. James Gleesick. We negotiated a price of $120,000 to purchase the property on the city's behalf. I also had Mr. Geisick sign a purchase agreement stating the same for the property to include, and I would also like to include in my resolution that you see before you, an extra $1,500 for closing costs, or up to $1,500 for closing costs. I'll take any questions that you might have.
Any questions for staff? Councilman,
I'm assuming we'll be filling in the blank on the resolution at the $120,000 price as stated in the contract.
Yes, sir, if that's what you approve.
Okay. And then the other question that I had, and I think the city clerk said that this document, the contract itself was originally in the packet, then it wasn't in the packet, but it's going to be memorialized in the council packet material along with this resolution. So for purposes of complete documentation, we'll have the contract in our materials in support of this resolution. Is that right?
I have that if you want me to submit that.
I'd
or
like
how do
to
you
have
want me
it
to-
entered into the
So we
record
can
since some
receive it.
didn't get it.
Yeah, we could have it received into the record. I have copies to do that.
Yeah. So if you have those, I make a motion to receive the document.
Councilman Legman,
And I'll second that.
cast your votes to receive purchase agreement.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, any comments from the public? Seeing none, any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger,
If there are none, I'd make a motion to approve resolution 2021-097 with the blank filled in the first whereas statement for $120,000.
Councilman Legman,
Second that. Do we need to put in there about the 1,500 also for the?
It should be in the
it's in the
resolution.
resolution.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Before we adjourn, city clerk did let me know that we did not hold second reading for the ordinance in regards 5578. So if it's okay with council, like to hold second reading, actually hold the reading right now before we adjourn. Is that okay with legal? We'll have second reading of ordinance, what was it?
578.
5578.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, repealing and replacing chapter 4, article 5, section 5-424 of the Fremont Municipal Code and all other ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect. On second reading.
All right, take a motion to adjourn. Councilman Sukram,
Make a motion to adjourn.
Councilman Gibson,
Second that.
cast your votes.
The motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
We are adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone.